The war had been grinding on for 17 cycles when Mina Hale arrived at Forward Operating Base, Cathara, with 3 cargo containers marked Cultural Exchange Materials. General Korvac Wren, a Velthari officer whose crystalline exoskeleton had seen action on 4 worlds, examined the manifest with growing confusion. Recreational devices? Korvac's translator converted his clicks into flat galactic standard. We requisitioned ammunition, medical supplies, ration packs. Mina grinned, her dark eyes glinting with something the general would later recognize as distinctly human mischief. You got something better. Trust me. The hierarchy had been losing the war against the Kraith swarm for decades. Their military doctrine was precise, logical, built on 10,000 years of calculated warfare. The Kraith were simply more numerous, more willing to sacrifice, more relentless. Every battle was a mathematics problem that ended in slow defeat. Then humanity had joined the Galactic Council. The humans were strange. They had reached the stars despite having no natural armor, no redundant organs, no species-wide telepathy. They were soft and fragile and utterly irrational. But they won their battles through methods that made career officers file incident reports in triplicate. Korvac watched as Mina unsealed the first container. Inside were thousands of small plastic discs, brightly colored, with curious aerodynamic properties. She called them frisbees. Explain the tactical application, Korvac demanded. Morale, Mina said simply. She picked up a frisbee yellow with a green spiral and sent it sailing across the hangar. It curved through the air with perfect grace. A junior Velthari officer caught it instinctively, mandibles clicking in surprise at the pleasant sensation. Within an hour, 3 species were playing catch. The second container held spherical objects: footballs, soccer balls, basketballs. Mina organized games in the mess hall, in the corridors, in the brief lulls between artillery barrages. The hierarchy soldiers learned to throw, to catch, to coordinate in ways their training had never emphasized. Korvac filed them under coordination training exercises. It wasn't entirely dishonest. The third container was the most controversial. It contained action figures, board games, playing cards, yo-yos, and something Mina called a Rubik's Cube that drove the hierarchy's AI specialists into fascinated obsession. This is not military equipment, Korvac protested, holding up a small plastic figure of what appeared to be a human warrior with impossible proportions. Says you, Mina replied. She had already taught a squad of Yohari shock troops how to play poker. They were terrible at it, they couldn't lie, but they kept trying, and their laughter echoed through corridors that had known only grim silence for months. The Kraith attacked 3 days later. They came in their standard formation. Overwhelming numbers, suicide drones, a willingness to trade 10 soldiers for every defender. The mathematics had always favored them. But something had changed at FOB Cathara. The defenders moved differently. The Velthari, who had coordinated through rigid chain of command protocols, now operated with fluid teamwork, learned from passing frisbees and footballs. The Yohari, masters of individual combat, had discovered team dynamics through Mina's games. Even the crystalline Netharii, whose species barely recognized individual identity, had found joy in small personal victories, a solved puzzle, a one-hand of cards, a mastered yo-yo trick. The Kraith assault broke against FOB Cathara like water against stone. Korvac watched from command as his forces repelled wave after wave, with half the casualties of previous engagements. His analysts were baffled. The tactical reports made no sense. Units were taking creative initiatives. Cross-species cooperation had improved by 40%. Stress casualties had dropped by 60%. In the aftermath, he found Mina teaching a group of wounded soldiers how to play something called Uno. They were arguing about the rules with an enthusiasm that seemed inappropriate for a medical ward. They were also healing faster than statistical projections suggested they should. Explain this, Korvac said, gesturing at the scene. Mina looked up from her cards. We call it play. It's how humans process trauma, build bonds, maintain sanity. You wanted to know why we won our wars despite being outmatched? She played a card, draw 4, wild, she called it triumphantly. This is how. We never forgot that we're fighting for something worth living for, not just dying for. Korvac's crystalline structure shifted through colors that indicated deep thought. The hierarchy had spent millennia perfecting the art of war. They had strategic academies, tactical doctrines, weapons research facilities. They had never considered that the space between battles might matter as much as the battles themselves. He filed an official report that night. The toys were classified as non-lethal armaments, morale enhancement systems. The classification spread through the hierarchy military. Other human advisors began arriving at other bases with their own cargo containers. 6 cycles later, the war turned. The Kraith, who had never understood why they fought beyond simple expansion, found themselves facing an enemy that remembered joy even in darkness. The hierarchy forces, who had endured through grim determination, discovered they could endure through something better. Hope, camaraderie, the simple pleasure of a game well played. Mina Hale was eventually awarded the hierarchy's highest civilian honor. At the ceremony, General Korvac Wren presented her with a medal and asked a question that had troubled him for months. Why toys? Why not weapons, tactics, technology? Mina smiled. Because, General, humans learned a long time ago that the species that knows how to play is the species that knows how to live, and the species that knows how to live will always find reasons to fight harder than the species that only knows how to die. She pulled out a frisbee, the same yellow one with the green spiral, and tossed it to him. Korvac caught it with reflexes honed by months of practice. For the first time in his 70-cycle military career, General Korvac Wren laughed. The war would continue for another 3 cycles before the Kraith sued for peace. But historians would mark the arrival of Mina Hale's cargo containers as the true turning point. The moment when the hierarchy learned that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their refusal to let war steal their humanity.